Hello, Mariah. How are you?
Uhuru, comrade, Uhuru.
Hello. We are back at it again.
We're
As
here. We're here. Come on in. Come on in.
every week without fail, you can count on
Every,
One Africa Worldview because we're gonna be here
every
Monday,
Monday, we're right here.
right? Hopefully the new time change and throw folks off, but we are starting at 3 p.m. Eastern moving forward. So make sure you mark your calendars and
Mark
ring that
the
little bell.
calendars.
Ring that little bell on our Burning Spear YouTube so you know when we're live. Make sure you do
Yes,
that.
yes, yes. Come on in. Come on in. We see you coming on in. Join us. Share us. Come
Do all
on
of
in.
it. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. Uhuru, and welcome to episode 14. That is 1-4 of the One Africa Worldview podcast. As always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Soliana, managing editor for the Burning Spear newspaper.
And I'm your co host, Dr. Mariah, Promotions Director for Black Power 96.3 FM Radio, where One Africa Worldview is airing.
Yes, it is. And as mentioned, this is the One Africa Review podcast, bringing you critical news and analysis from the African internationalist perspective. And you've heard us say this a lot by now, but African internationalism is a theory developed by our chairman, Omali to sum up and define the conditions of our dispersed African nation and establish the trajectory toward our liberation. So it's what we, not just what we think, but what we do about what we think and what we see out in the world, right? So this theory centers colonialism as the primary contradiction that not only we as Black people face no matter where we are, but one that the entire world is grappling with and suffering from. Chairman Omali has defined this global, parasitic, political, and economic relationship as a colonial mode of production, right? Establishing the starting point of capitalism with the colonial assault on Africa, Asia, the so-called Americas, and elsewhere. And obviously, more about this theory and worldview, can be understood by reading the Burning Spear newspaper, right, our official organ. So we'll kick off our program with the Whirlwind Weekly update, as we always do, giving you African internationalist analysis on on today's and the day's top headlines. So, Comrade Mariah, last week we reported on U.S. aggression against Venezuela and President Nicolas Maduro. So, have you got an update for us on that front?
Yeah, actually, I do. Last week, as you know, we did report on how the U.S. deployed over 4,000 Marines and other military armed warships, aircrafts, all of that over a nuclear powered submarine, even over to Latin America. So, in response, on August the 20th, democratically elected president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, announced that the intention for the national mobilization of 4.5 million militia fighters establishing unions of civilians, police, military, all here to ensure that the response to engineers to put obstacles in front of the enemy forces as they are trying to enter Caracas and the capital, that's the capital of Venezuela. So then they plan to reroute them into this path of this armed Bolivarian forces there. So in addition to this, the Interior Minister actually presented a large amount of weapons seized. And these were linked to the Venezuelan reactionary forces led by Maria Corina Machado. So, and there just actually was an arrest warrant out for her since last year. So they also discovered that evidence that these forces, they've been made alliances with drug traffickers in the area. So earlier this month, they had planned a terrorist attack in Caracas with 1,137 explosives found with U.S. sponsorship actually behind that. So this Bolivarian police force is just foiled, okay? So the Venezuelan reactionaries are Zionists and support ICE against migrants, including the Venezuelans. So Mercado wants to hand over Venezuelans' oil to the U.S. government in exchange for help from the U.S. So for the purpose of planning to overthrow the people's government and to become the president. And it's all for the power. The past Saturday and this past Sunday, President Maduro announced the beginning of the voluntary national enlistment for the National Plan of Sovereignty and Peace at 15,751 popular integral defense bases. So the Venezuelan people understand that the U.S. is waging this psychological warfare, and the Venezuelan people and government, they aren't ideologically and physically prepared for this threatened invasion. Here's President Maduro rallying Venezuelan in response to the U.S. aggression.
Fuimos el ejército unido del libertador Simón Bolívar, que le dio la libertad en Boyacá a lo que hoy es Colombia. No lo olvidemos nunca. Militares colombianos, no olviden que ustedes son hijos de Bolívar también. Y que llegará el día de la unión otra vez. Pero todavía no. Su merced, todavía no. Ahorita es coordinación. ¿Verdad? Es coordinación porque nuestros mares, nuestros cielos y nuestras tierras las defendemos nosotros, las liberamos nosotros, las vigilamos y las patrullamos nosotros. Ningún imperio va a venir a tocar suelo sagrado de Venezuela, ni debería tocar suelo sagrado de Sudamérica. Ningún imperio del mundo.
Wow. Wow. So Venezuela, don't forget, is also surrounded by all these jungles and mountains in the area. And some has really said that Venezuela will actually be US's Latin Vietnam. So President Maduro has called for a Colombian-Venezuelan union, as well as a call for the people of Latin America and the Caribbean to form a bloc. On August the 21st, a U.S. Navy plane conducted surveillance in the Caribbean Sea off of the Venezuelan coast. So Russia and China have stated support, and Iran denounces the aggression of Washington against Venezuela. So Luis Arce of Bolivia has also expressed support for Venezuela. And many say that the U.S. is actually threatening Venezuela because the U.S. failed in Russia and in Iran. So those are the developments that we're seeing in just a few thousand nautical miles south. So what's going on out east in Yemen?
Right. Thank you so much, Mariah, for that. Yeah. So, on August 22nd, a ballistic missile from Yemen hit occupied Jaffa, currently known as Tel Aviv, despite attempted intervention by U.S.-operated THAAD, which stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System and Aero System. So, the occupation entire entity falsely, claimed that it intercepted all of Yemen's missiles. And the armed forces of Yemen announced the targeting of Lod Airport and occupied Jaffa with Palestine-2 hypersonic ballistic missiles, which caused confusion in the ranks of the occupation forces. It caused millions of Zionists to run to shelters and the airport to temporarily stop operating. And Yemen's UAV forces also targeted the Jaffa and Ascalon areas with 2 drones. And a source, and that's actually the Palestine-2 missile. And a source in Yemen's Ministry of Defense says that, these missiles consist of multiple warheads. So when they are intercepted, they split, so they hit more targets, right? Because of this, the airspace at Ben Gurion Airport was also closed. And also, Iran has developed a new missile with a range of over 3,000 kilometers, and they tested this missile during the Ektadar 1404 naval drills. And also, in a press conference just this past Friday, a spokesperson for the Yemeni armed forces said, quote, "A victory for the oppressed Palestinian people and their fighters, and a direct response to the Zionist crimes of genocide and starvation against our people in the Gaza Strip, and that Yemen, with its steadfast people, its struggling army, and its faithful leadership, will remain at your side until the aggression against you ends and the siege is lifted," unquote. So we're seeing a lot of solidarity coming out of the Arab world there. But Comrade Mariah, what's happening back in the U.S. with the colonial prison that is the Alligator Alcatraz?
Wow, Alligator Alcatraz. Well, the indigenous Miccosukee people have joined a suit by the Friends of the Everglades and the Center for Biological Diversity against this Alligator Alcatraz. So the Miccosukee people did not give permission for the Alligator Alcatraz to even be constructed next to the indigenous Miccosukee villages. So the other arguments were all about the environment. So that's all environmental. It could cost billions of dollars to actually restore the damage in the Everglades area, the Everglades. So it threatens to damage the food and the water supply, and it just really threatens to damage all the endangered species in the area. So on August the 7th, a judge actually ruled that the construction on Alligator Alcatraz must be temporarily stopped until August the 12th. So on August the 21st, a court ordered no new construction, no new prisoners, and the facility be closed within 60 days. So the Miami-Dade County tried to take credit for the court's decision, but they had opposed it with a brief arguing why the plaintiffs should not get a temporary restraining order and violated a 2021 court settlement that protected undocumented individuals from being handed over to ICE. So the human rights abuses were not listed among these reasons for the ordering of its closure. A man who was in prison at Alligator Alcatraz said that he was forced to eat while his hands and feet were handcuffed, was not allowed to sleep at all, and just moved from cell to cell constantly throughout his whole time there. And another man reported that this was actually someone's husband from Chile that disappeared in Alligator Alcatraz, and no one even really knows where he is now. So the current prisoners, they have not been released at this time, but this court decision is a victory for the indigenous people on the land, and this land was stolen from them, and another just blow against colonialism there. So the construction of and the fight against Alligator Alcatraz has also alerted more people to state oppression in the colonial prison system. And it's just which thousands of domestically colonized Africans just really experience this every day. In the county jails that we see, the state and federal prisons, including those over in Angola and Louisiana. We have Parchment in Mississippi. We have Rikers up in New York. I mean, just seeing it over and over again. Wow.
Right, that's right. Thank you so much for that update. And it definitely is a victory that this isn't happening, right? We don't need no more prisons, that's for damn sure. But 2 episodes ago, we talked about also the meeting that Trump and Putin were having in Alaska about the Ukraine situation and to see if any deal could be reached that would either lead to a ceasefire or some form of mutual agreement, the exclusion of Ukraine notwithstanding, right? And there were talks of land being ceded to Russia and even being able to have this meeting alone for Putin in Alaska, of all places, right? A place that used to be part of Russia was a victory for Putin, right? A U.S. president and Putin haven't met in a really long time, I don't think since Obama. So it just demonstrated just how, how few cards that the U.S.-EU axis have at this stage of the war, and just how really dependent the EU is ultimately on what the U.S. decides. But as we may have heard, this, meeting concluded with an impasse, with no deal being reached. And shortly after the meeting ended, Trump and Putin held a press conference in which they amazingly just took no questions, as one would expect from a press conference. But they simply said that they had reached some kind of understanding without really elaborating at all what the details of that understanding actually entails. But despite that, Trump emphasized the productivity of the meeting. So instead of taking questions, as one does in a press conference, Trump used the conference to, bemoan what he felt were the lies of the 2016 election and the whole notion of Russia's involvement as a hoax, while maintaining that the 2020 election was stolen from him, right? And if the leader of world colonial powers believes that Russian involvement in U.S. elections is a hoax, right, he needs to immediately drop the charges on the Uhuru Three, who still face this bogus conviction of conspiracy to act as Russian agents, right? And this is in part because we ran for office on a platform of reparations to African people, right? So it's not, surprising really to see the colonizer dispense even with their own so-called democracy, right? As long as it suits their colonial project. And, Trump got all the heat for denying the 2020 election, but so did the Democrats in 2016, right? And this is just a great example of how these two political entities are just two sides of the same coin, right? But for all intents and purposes, this meeting did not lead to any deal that the public was made aware of, at least, and a ceasefire was not announced. And if anything, ironically, Russian missiles were actually continuing to, lambast Ukraine during the meeting. So we just have no idea really what's going on behind closed doors at this point. But yes, so for our last headline, I believe, Carmen Mara, you have something about the removal of slavery talk. So take us through that.
Wow. So, as if we weren't already tired of hearing all this Trump talk out, once again, the colonial ruling class is showing its hand, and this time it's coming directly out of Donald Trump's mouth himself. In a recent attack on institutions like the Smithsonian, Trump criticized the museum for focusing too much on how bad slavery was. And he just went on to say that America should just stop making itself look so evil and instead teach patriotic history that uplifts the greatest of the country. And I mean, let's just be real, y'all. what Trump is really saying and then calling for is a whitewash fantasy here. And he just wants to erase the truth, rewrite the past, and just silence the voice of African people. And just these African people, we are finally telling our truth in our own stories. So this is just not about these museums. We know this is all about control, y'all. And as you saw all across the country, entire school systems are being banned books, gutting out the Black history courses here, and just all the sort here. And what they are really doing, y'all, is just criminalizing any honest discussion of slavery, racism, or colonialism. And in Florida, we hear that the teachers are actually telling that you can't even mention race unless it's in a sanitized and state-approved way. And over in Texas, the textbooks are just being rewritten to call enslaved Africans immigrants, and that transatlantic slave trade a labor exchange. So this is an all-out assault on the damn truth, y'all. And why? Because white America is tired of hearing about it. And that's what they're saying now. And why are we still talking about slavery is what they're saying over and over. That was so long ago. They want to move on, y'all. And not because they're innocent, but because they're still benefiting from the crimes of the past. So they're tired of hearing about slavery because it forces them to confront that reality, the reality that is their entire system, their schools, their banks, their government, and in this case, their comfort is built on what? Our suffering. So Trump's language is just more than just this offensive distraction, y'all. You best believe it's a signal to what? His colonial state. It's telling the ruling class, double down, y'all. Keep our children ignorant. Keep our communities miseducated. Keep the truth buried under their patriotic lies. Because the moment African people begin to truly understand our past is the very moment we start to organize for power in the present, y'all. So this isn't just historical visionary or anything else. It's our all-out political warfare. So they want to steal our history because they know it fuels our resistance. So because we know that our ancestors survived that Middle Passage, rebelled on the plantations, organized freedom movements, and built civilizations even under the heel of the white power, we stop seeing ourselves as victims, y'all, and start seeing ourselves as the leaders of a revolution. So to Trump and every white liberal or conservative who's tired of hearing about slavery, I want you to listen. I want you to listen to me very, very carefully. And understand me when I say this. We will not be silent. We will speak the names of our ancestors. We will teach our children the truth. We will tell our stories in our own words. So, because this history doesn't just live in museums, it lives in our bones. It's in our communities. It's the way we talk. It's the way we move. It's the fight for our liberation, and it's in our soul and deep in our spirits. So you may erase those textbooks, tear down all the exhibits, and continue to pass these laws steeped in colonialism. But I'll tell you one thing is for sure. You will never erase the African nation's memory. And you will never stop this movement. And all this shows us, as we already know, we are winning. Speaking of a history we'll never forget, no matter how much a colonizer attempts to undermine it, let's go into our primary objective here, where we're raising up the Haitian Revolution.
Wow, mic drop. I know y'all heard Cover Mariah right there. All right. Yes, it's a history that they refuse to teach, right? In part because of the devastating defeat that the colonizer was handed. But the Haitian Revolution was, one that really shook the colonial world. It was driving fear into the colonizers, extending all the way to Europe, right? As the future of the colonies and colonized subjects became, the center of their concern. So just to really go into this context, right? The Haitian Revolution began on August 21, 1791, and it ended on January 1st, 1804, right? It was not only the first successful slave revolt, it was also the world's first successful workers' revolution, despite the fact that it is so often purposefully ignored when discussing workers or socialist revolutions throughout history. And I've seen this happen with my own eyes. I remember I was in a class when I was an undergrad, and we were talking about revolutions. My professor was like, "Oh, call out any revolutions that you know." And I was like, "Oh, like Haitian Revolution." She's like, "Well, that's not really revolution. I'm thinking more like the French Revolution. And I was just flabbergasted. Okay, this was an HBCU. And in HBCU, we were being taught that the Haitian Revolution doesn't really qualify as the colonizer's definition of a revolution, right? So one example right there. But the reality was that Haiti became the blueprint for the rest of the African world, right? It was becoming a Black republic for all enslaved Africans who should come there. African people under the leadership of Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines defeated the French, Spanish, and British, three biggest colonizers of the time, I mean, continue to be, by delivering this major assault on the colonial capitalist economy, which was a slave-based economy.
Wow. So, yeah, just looking at some of the historic background information on the colonization of Haiti, we can look at pre-Columbus invasion back in 1942, where Haiti, or Haiti, was inhabited by the Taino Arawak people, and who were indigenous to the Caribbean and Florida. And they were the primary inhabitants of Cuba, Jamaica, and what became known as Hispaniola, or Haiti, in the Dominican Republic. And we also see Puerto Rico's involved there. So the population of the Taino was estimated to be over 1 million at this time. So from 1492 and on there, following that colonial invasion by Christopher Columbus, we saw within the 25 years that the Taino population would be reduced to approximately 32,000 people. So from 1 million down to 32,000. Columbus renames the island to Hispaniola, or Little Spain, which is now written as Hispaniola, and combines Haiti and the Dominican Republic. The Taino people are reduced to slaves, and Africans are imported into Haiti for the purposes of cultivating the dangerous sugarcane crop there. So in December of 1518, the Spaniards brought with them smallpox, which killed 90% of the remaining Taino population. So by 1548, the Taino population had declined to fewer than 500 people, y'all. And the 1600s came, and the Spanish ceded Haiti to France, who claimed it under the name Saint Dominique. The French imported larger numbers of Africans to work these plantational economy, producing tobacco at the time, indigo, and still sugar, among other things, for France's economy. So by the 1700s, Haiti accounted for 2/3 of France's overseas trade and was the world's largest sugar exporter at the time. It was said to have produced more sugar than any of the British-controlled colonies of the West Indies. So this economy, of course, was rallied on the hundreds of thousands of Africans captured from Congo, Angola, and even Mozambique, y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much for that context. This happened during a time where we didn't even have like a conception of, the word genocide to describe what was happening. But this was genocide. And even today, we, shy away from that word as if that's not what's happening to African people and that's not what's happening to, Palestinians. But I appreciate you also mentioning just how, dangerous the sugar plantation was for African people, and just, everyone forced to work there. People were losing life and limb, right, every day on this plantation. So that in itself, being, forced to do that was another form of genocide that was happening while they were also extracting their labor. But yeah, the Taino people, moved to the brink of extinction. And at the same time, African people are enduring some of the worst, again, reported conditions of slavery and colonialism, producing all of this wealth for Europe at the same time. So, the posh, proper, and civilized France and all that it's known for is achieved through this barbarism, right? Through genocide and this theft. And what these, facts really reveal is the correctness of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's theoretical development regarding a colonial mode of production, right? It is the colonies, the slave trade, the Africans, and the production coming from those enslaved Africans that resulted in the emerging capitalist economy in Europe, and of course extended to the Americas. So you can't have one without the other, right? This was necessary for that development. And as we mentioned, coming to the end of the 18th century, the African Revolution of Haiti began. And it was extremely well organized, and it followed a strategic plan that, among other things, demanded the enslaved to Koupe Tet, Boule Kay, or to cut heads, burn houses, right? Sparing nothing, not even those Africans who refused to turn on their masters, right? So let's watch this extended clip of Chairman Omali Yeshitela from an Omali Taught Me Sunday study on the Haitian Revolution.
Led a successful revolution. In Haiti, you saw the first and only successful slave revolution in history came in Haiti. The first successful workers' revolution in the world. Black people did that in Haiti, which is normal because black people were first workers under what they call capitalism, and first capital in capitalism, etc. So you have this magnificent revolution, but could not be seen and recognized as such by the colonizers, whether they call themselves workers or whether they call themselves capitalists or what have you, a boss. So in looking at Haiti, it is an incredible thing to look at, and partially what makes it important to us and to the world is the Africans in Haiti were not fighting against what they call racism. They were fighting against colonialism. They were fighting to take power, and this was one of the differences in Dessalines and Toussaint. Toussaint would have been satisfied with being a part of the French Empire. With a neo-colonial solution was something that Toussaint was willing to accept, and which helps us also to understand that the struggle against colonialism is a struggle that involves the whole nation of people. It's not just the workers who are oppressed and exploited under colonialism. It's the whole class. It's the whole nation. And so, but it helps us to understand that the petty bourgeoisie can lead the struggle against colonialism, but it can't restructure the society and elevate the workers and the people who created all the wealth to leaders of that society. If I'm not mistaken, I think I read some time ago that Toussaint Louverture at one time was never a field hand, but he worked as a coach person. He was a coachman for the white colonizers, the French, and which was one of the things that distinguished him. He was brilliant. Make no mistake about it. He crushed the military France. He beat them. He beat England, Spain. I mean, and that's what Haiti did. The Haitian Revolution fought every major colonial power on earth. The exception being at that time what was emerging as America, and it challenged the Americas by influencing the revolutionary movements of African people in what we now call the Americas. People like Denmark Vesey, who had 9,000 people who were following him with the intent to become free, and had planned to have a magnificent revolution, and they would all take ships and go to Haiti. There were others during this time frame within the United States that were influenced. So Haiti, the notion of revolution was something that spread from Haiti. And I think it's important for us to remember this as revolution. This is what people were fighting for. Again, it's important because we have certain kinds of examples from that period that help to distinguish what the struggle was really about from how it's being characterized today, and how others tried to characterize, even the white people who loved us. I think this man's name was Garrison or something like that, who was some kind of, what do you call it? The people who were fighting for abolition of slavery. To fight for the abolition of slavery is an idea about changing the form of the state. It's not necessarily fighting for the liberation of African people. The fight for the abolition of slavery, in fact, Garrison made the point that African people should be freed, but should be freed as what? As Americans. So how are you free if the one who captured you and enslaved you now say, okay, you're free, but you're an American? I mean, what the hell is this? What kind of freedom is that if the ones who have enslaved you can tell you who you are? I mean, that's what it's about in the first place. That's why people picked up these funny names that's been imposed on us by the colonizer. That's why it was important that Africans in Santo Domingo, however it was characterized, to become Haitians, because this is the name of the indigenous people, the indigenous land. And so people name ourselves. People who have power name themselves. People don't, you don't have countries where you import somebody to come to your country to name you, unless you're Catholic or something to that effect, and then they give you all these funny names and put water on you. But otherwise, people name themselves. That's what a free society does, So I think it's important that the struggle in Haiti brings into bold relief this whole thing about African people and what it is that we're fighting for, something that many of us have lost sight of. And it's not like we lost sight. It was pushed out of our vision by murder. by mayhem. Some of this was hinted at in this this series coming from the book Roots. I forgot who Haley plagiarized this book from, but where, you know, the Toby versus the character, name of the character, Koupe Tet, the whole brutal change your name. And if you can change your name, that's a part of changing your history. You know, you change your history. Names are connected, have historical significance, historical meaning. They come from somewhere. And so what has happened is God has given you a new name. God has changed your name. And when I say God, what I'm talking about is the role that the colonizer plays in the lives of those of us who are colonized. So here, this person now changed you. Now you're Smith and you're Jones. You know, this is, and the whole notion of God creates humans in what? In her own image, right? And so now you got God who's recreated the African person in the image of the white man. And so this is something that you know, that we've struggled with, and that captured our imagination, our understanding of history and things like that. You don't have a history anymore. Your history starts with the advent of this relationship you have with the colonizer, with white people, with the white man. You have no agency at all, and this is really important. You're not able to influence the history, your life, or anything. Is somebody else, something else always does that, and that's something that's recognized by the whole world. Everybody recognizes that Black people have no agency. Somebody else always tells you what to do, when to do it. In fact, Fela wrote about it, called a song called Zombie. Zombie say walk when he wants you to walk. Zombie say talk when he wants you to talk. Zombie say die when he wants you to die. Live. This is Zombie. This is a zombie. Speaking of Haiti. So this is a part of what it is that we're contending with. Emile Cabral, you know, once made the point that the revolution of African people is a struggle to re-enter into history, as opposed to being, you know, part of somebody else's history. And that's what you are when Marx defined this move from the feudal mode of production that Europeans live with to what he characterized as the colonial mode of production. He said this came about as a consequence of turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of Black skins. But all of this is what he referred to as primitive accumulation of capital. In other words, this is the beginning. This is the beginning. But what is it the beginning of? It's the beginning of the emergence of white people in history, because there was no white man before this. There was no Europe before this. There were people existing in this space they might refer to as Christendom. There were, people who in this area that we now know as Europe, who were engaged in permanent warfare against each other, with just warring tribes, etc. But there was no white man. There was no Europe. This was a recent phenomenon. What gave birth to the white man and to Europe was this process that Marx called the primitive accumulation of capital, which was a whole new mode of production. And most of it occurred not in Europe, but outside of Europe, in the sense that it was capturing Black people. It was capturing this land that we sit on right now that's called America. It resulted in just brutal warfare against the rest of the world that gave rise to this system. So Haiti, so this whole notion of what it is you're fighting for, what is the struggle about, and where you have no memory of ever having been free. You have no memory. You have no memory. This is the depth, extent of the brutality, assault that's been made on Black people, and then they would make your history. They call it superstition. Then where you come from, your history, they even lie. And when I grew up, I went to school and they taught us that Black people we were not literate. We didn't have a written language. We just were oral people, etc. When written language comes from Black people, this is the kind of thing that's been imposed on us. So you have no memory, you have no history, and then what happens? They pour this history, this memory into you, the way it functions to support the whole colonial mode of production. And so here you have people who really might like us, who really might love us, but they are limited too in terms of how they perceive the world. The colonizer who perceives the world, who may himself have been brutalized through this process, as feudal fodder and what have you, learns to understand the world through this process of primitive accumulation. This is what gives birth to the consciousness of white people, of European. For example, it's very difficult for many people, including white people who live on this stolen territory that we call America, to even think of life separate from that, because that's the end of their existence. You understand? How can you exist when I'm saying to you there was no such thing as you stole this land, you renamed it, you killed the people and put them in concentration camps, then call yourself an American. So for you to participate in the best possible way, you have to cede your identity. It's an assault on your identity. It's deep, it's profound, it's more than what most of our oppressors can understand. And unfortunately, too often, it's more than what we understand. So the whole notion of freedom for African people who have no memory of being free. And so when we talk about freedom, most people can think about this in the terms of improvement of some sort within the colonial mode of production. So we say, I want to be free. And when they say free, you say free. But you mean something completely different, because you know that history didn't start on the cotton plantation. History didn't start in slavery. History started as us being a free people, and the only thing that made us slaves or less than free was the introduction of Europe into our lives. This violent assault that was made on Africa, made on the indigenous people into our lives. So it's very difficult for people who cannot conceive of anything other than the existing situation to think of freedom. How can you think? When I say freedom, they mean the right to vote. They mean better rights to go downtown. They mean to get a job, good job with the white people. They mean not being quote unquote discriminated against. They cannot understand freedom as something that liquidates the whole concept of discrimination. You know, I mean, because now you are in charge. They say justice. When I say justice, they say justice mean entirely two different things. When they say justice, they mean what we can get under colonialism. When I say justice, I mean what we give ourselves as a consequence of being empowered. You see, and so that's one of the limitations. But Haiti, Koupe Tet, Boule Kay, cut heads, burn houses, so that we can have our own freedom. They didn't say, let's get on the ship and go to France and kill everybody. They didn't say that. They say, Koupe Tet, Boule Kay. They said that everybody who is a citizen here is black. They didn't say you had to go buy shoe polish or anything like that. But you are now black if you're a citizen. You can get out of town. You can leave, and many did. And many of the settlers in Haiti left, and they came to what we now know as America. In this country, they came to this country and they brought messages of terror with them. They terrorized all of the white people who still held us under colonial domination. They said, this is what it looks like, freedom looks like for black people, right? Koupe Tet, Boule Kay, you understand? So to keep it from here, they became even more brutal. But they excited people like Nat Turner. Yeah. They excited people like Denmark Vesey. They excited other people, say, hey, this is the way forward. So the thing is, this was an incredible moment in history. It was a critical moment in history. And so the first and perhaps the only time that the whole capitalist system shuddered as a consequence of revolution was one that was led by African people, because Africans were the pedestal upon which the whole system of slavery and colonialism rested. So if Africans were free, boom, no capitalism. If Haiti became the example, boom, no capitalism. Not the French Revolution, as they like to characterize it, but that island there with something like, I've forgotten how many people there now, who were there now, that island. And most of the people, Africans, many if not most, who were brought into captivity from Africa, they came through Haiti. They came to that island, and which was incredibly significant. And they were killing Africans with such frequency there, so that within 7 years, you were dead. If they brought you there, they worked Africans to death in a 7-year period. And so what that meant was that Africans didn't live long enough to get used to being enslaved, to get used to the white man being a dominant force, like has happened. That's what I'm talking about now in terms of the idea, memory of being free. People had a memory of freedom there. And they not only had a memory of freedom there, but they exported it to various other places around the world. You know, there was a system they called slave breaking, so that an African who was first brought from Africa to what they call the Americas, etc., were first beaten up, broken down, etc., to break Africans, so that the memory and of resistance, the memory of being free, was something that was pushed out of our consciousness and what have you. So Haiti was fundamental.
You know, leave it to the chairman to just lay it out all out for us like that. You know, I just really, it's so powerful, and I just appreciate the chairman just distinguishing how like African history has been painted as like the superstition, right? The contributions and the sciences of African people as somehow not scientific and as, you know, mystical or again superstitious, right? Our beliefs as superstitious, and you know the way we engage with our histories itself colonized, because if the colonizers, if we were to follow the colonizers' version of history, right, it will never be one that will have us believe that we were once a free people, right? That it will never be the one that has that will have us believe that the Haitian Revolution was this revolution that turned the world upside down as we knew it, right? And this isn't important just to like raise up African history as this thing that we look back to, but it fuels our resistance today, right? Our real history lets us know that we were once a free people, that we have the capability of being free, and that we will, again, once be free, right? And so I think it's a really powerful way that Chairman put that. But, before we wrap up this segment, we should also make mention that, the conditions that Haiti experiences now is part of this, ongoing punishment for the success of the revolution. Right, Haiti was forced to pay France 112 million francs due to loss of property, which actually just meant enslaved Africans. And from the New York Times, actually in 2022, there's this article, and we'll quote from here. They say, "This became known as Haiti's double debt, the ransom and the loan to pay it. A stunning loan that boosted the fledgling Parisian international banking system and helped cement Haiti's path into poverty and underdevelopment. The double debt helped push Haiti into the cycle of debts that hobbled the country for more than 100 years, draining away much of its revenue and chopping away at its ability to build the essential institutions and infrastructure of an independent nation." Haitians paid about $560 million in today's dollars, but that doesn't nearly capture the true loss. If that money had simply stayed in the Haitian economy and grown at the nation's actual pace over the last 2 centuries, rather than being shipped off to France without any goods or services being provided in return, it would have added a staggering $21 billion, that's with a B, $21 billion to Haiti over time, even accounting for its notorious corruption and waste. It's the New York Times, so they're always going to throw in that bit there, but just, showing you just how devastating this, forcing Haiti to pay reparations for its own revolution was really to the Haitian economy up until this day, right? And, the political and economic isolation, the installment of puppet regimes, neocolonialism, and, the purposeful destabilization by the U.S. government has resulted in Haiti's present condition, and the slander against the Africans on the island as well, right? And that's what we must understand as Africans, no matter where we are, right? Haiti provided the blueprint, and we must unite the African nation to fight for African socialist independence, right? So with that, I think we can go into our For the Culture segment to discuss this new Jussie Smollet documentary. So, Karen Marai, can you kick us off that?
Yeah, absolutely. Released just a few days ago, the new Jussie Smollett documentary on Netflix titled The Truth About Jussie Smollett, yes, that is with a question mark, y'all, has divided the people once more on who to believe. And if y'all remember, on January 19th of 2019, Jussie, the actor who really got his break on the hit show Empire, claimed that he was the victim of a hate crime for being Black and gay. So this happened at about 2 a.m., apparently, during one of the coldest nights in Chicago during the 2019 polar vortex that was happening then. And he reported that he was called these slurs, beaten up during this time, and just had a noose tied around his neck by 2 MAGA white guys who were masked up and on all Black. as described as wearing. So as the police began investigating, however, some weird inconsistencies started coming up. And they really, with the story that Jussie was telling, and through their investigation, though, they were identified that 2 African brothers are those who carried out the attack. So, and what was crazy, y'all, is that they were also on Empire as extras. And one of them actually had a relationship, even as a friend, with Jussie as his personal trainer also. So when they were arrested for this crime, the brothers came out saying that it was actually Jussie himself who paid them to beat him up so he could get some form of attention or further help his career somehow there. So there were even some talks that he was unhappy with the amount of money he was making as an actor at one of the motivators for allegedly doing this. So which really doesn't make too much sense when you think about it. It's just crazy.
Right. And regardless of this, like once the news broke, what was once, a flurry of support for Jussie from all directions turned into just absolute rancor, right? The tide completely turned against Jussie's favor publicly. And it got to the point where they actually removed his character. I believe he played Jamal for the last 2 episodes of Empire, right? So video evidence of the brothers buying sketchy items like a rope a day or so before the incident further seemed to point to the fact that this just seemed like a complete hoax. But while this was happening, though, Jussie never really changed the story at all. He always stuck to it. He was adamant that it was not the brothers that did this to him, and that it was nobody black either, for that matter. He was so, straight up with that. This was 2 white men that did this to me.
2 white men, yeah, he was very adamant about that, and this whole fiasco really led to actually charges. Jussie actually was charged with a trial. He had it all there. A trial ended with him actually being fined the maximum amount for lying to police and just wasting the Chicago police resources here. And that's what was cited, as well as sentenced to 150 days in the Cook County jail there. So despite this just seeming just an open and shut case, it really is not. And at least the way the police played it out, they said it was open and shut, but it's not. Other private investigators just really started digging in and looking at that Chicago police themselves and seeing that there was a lot going on there. And they began to discover all these other misconducts that actually happened, and the police done themselves. And that's really no surprise at all. So they tampered with evidence in cases. They ignored the contradictory testimony in the case. Just all eyewitnesses that were coming forward, they didn't want to hear it. So that whole narrative they preferred was the one that they kept intact there. Wow.
Right, that's absolutely true. And I know the documentary even brought up how the Chicago police, obviously not surprising, but they had a long history of messing with evidence, right? Particularly, the documentary talked about the case of Laquan McDonald, who was a 17-year-old African who was shot 16 times by the Chicago police in 2014. So tensions were already high. Folks were not over this devastation. So, Comrade, can you give us just a little bit more context on this when this, happened in Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. Just for sure. Let's think about it. Let's take a step back here during that time. This was that time that, just the larger context when all of the stuff that was going down here it wasn't just some isolated celebrity scandal here. It was actually strategically timed. January 29th was just a few years after the murder of Laquan McDonald that you just mentioned. And Laquan was a 17-year-old African child and was actually gunned down in cold blood in Chicago, shot 16 times by Chicago police. So, and let's not forget that the cover-up reached all the way to the top, where they had video footage showing this and this murder that occurred, being hidden for over a year at this point and only released after massive protests and organizing from the Black community. So yeah, the city was just still reeling, y'all. And this was also, on top of that, the height of the Black Lives Matter wave, and when uprising against police terror were just really erupted all across the country. We saw it happening, not only there in Chicago, but it was happening all over there, over in Ferguson, places like Baltimore, New York too. It's just all of them really just exposing the police, the courts, and the whole colonial system for what it really is, y'all. And the state was on its heels during this time, facing that whole global condemnation that violence against Black people. Now, y'all remember, that's the context that we have to keep in mind there. So here comes this very high profile case. Jussie Smollet, a Black, openly gay celebrity, just known for playing this revolutionary type character on Empire, that Jamal, as you mentioned, this Black-led popular TV show all on its own. So just suddenly he's allegedly attacked in what sounds like this whole textbook hate crime. I mean, the whole thing there, the news, the bleach. I mean, had it all, the MAGA red hats there. It just really hit every political nerve there. So just as fast as this story shifts to who? The state turned it into something else. And it goes from a story about racist violence and queer Black vulnerability into this media circus that we mentioned of just whether Jussie is lying. That became the focus there. Is he lying or not? And here's the kicker. The kicker is that they don't just go after Jussie here. They exploit 2 other African men in this process. So now it's just that not white supremacists are on trial. It's the Africans versus Africans. So this is what colonialism does best, y'all. It divides, distract, and destroy. And we see it happening over and over. So whether Jussie set it up or just not become secondary to how the state uses the situation. And because in a city like Chicago, where the cops have been caught planting evidence, torturing suspects over there, and just really just running Black sites even, why are we so quick to believe their version of the story? So the Chicago Police Department has never had any credibility when it comes to African people. They had every reason to shut down a conversation about hate crimes too, just race, the sexuality that was involved here. It's just so instead, they turned it into that one thing, celebrity fraud, Black liars, and drama queens here. So they knew exactly what they were doing when they did this, and the people fell for it, y'all. And let's just be real. What better way to really just neutralize all this talk and put an end to a conversation that really put these white nationalists violence that to pit 3 African men against each other in the media, so in the courts and in public opinion. So again, whether Jussie did it or not, that's not really the whole story here. Y'all, the real story is how the colonial state seized the moment, flip the narrative, and turn a potentially revolutionary flashpoint into a distraction. So it's what they've always done, because as long as we're watching Jussie and the brothers there fight each other, we're not watching the system. And that is the real crime, y'all.
That is the real crime. I appreciate you taking us through that context, Mariah. And, one would think that a release of a documentary like this, 6 years after the incident, no less, would make you think that, okay, maybe they had new evidence that clears a lot of this up. Right. But it managed to do quite the opposite. And people are still split on who they believe or who to even believe. And here are some reactions from folks on Twitter that we'll just read out to you. So we have the first one up. This person says, "Child, me watching this Jussie Smollet Netflix with a gif of Kid Cudi scratching his head, because like I said, no one is clear." We have another one where this person says, "So Jussie Smollett kept the noose on his neck until police got to his house," and this is, and it's accompanied with a gif of Viola Davis where she has that unbelieving face and just gets up with her bag. Yeah, and then another one where they say, "Jussie, people were already forgetting about your foolishness, and then you went and made a documentary. Why?" And then this is accompanied by a gif of that. Forgot his name, but I think it's the NBA player Nick Young, where he's looking at the camera all confused with the question marks. Because it's true. I mean, I totally forgot about this case until they made this documentary. But then we have another one where this commenter says 3 things: 1, the documentary was good; 2, I don't trust Chicago police; 3, Jussie Smollett is still lying. And I feel like that's probably more so what people are hearing on at this point. But like we said, regardless of whether one believes one side or the other, the reality is that, under this colonial capitalist system, right, the police are an armed force of the state, right? They're created, right? They're genesis to carry out this genocidal or murderous project on those whom it deems a threat, usually African and colonized people. You see this is a fact. We don't need to throw stats at you, right? And white people, historically and presently have become willing tools of the colonial state, right? Carrying out white nationalist violence against Africans, right? We covered this a lot in the Spear as well. And this colonial system has bred white nationalist ideology that necessitates and also justifies violence against Black people. That's why Smollet's case can be believed, and the state has an interest in making him out to be a liar, like you said, Comrade Mariah. And that truth that Trump doesn't want us talking about anymore. So, and this case also is another example of just how the police maneuver and use opportunities like these to use the Black petty bourgeoisie as a way to better their own self-image, and also obscure the fact that the police have been an entity for the attack on African people historically and today, right? And in the documentary, folks got to watch it. We even had a Black police chief play that role for them during this incident and in the documentary, because although he wasn't necessarily singing the praises of the Chicago Police Department, he was very much on the side of, well, the police as an entity aren't the problem. It's the few white racists within the police force that are the problem, right? So it's this whole notion of a bad apple sort of thing. So yeah, we see that colonial project being put forth through this incident. So the documentary, left us again with more questions than answers, really, when it comes to who lied or not. We know damn sure that the police are always lying, right? That's one thing we can never err on. And another important reminder is also, we don't have to lie on the colonizer, right? We have 600 years worth of evidence to go through and expose. So with that, we could just wrap up this section here. Thank you so much, Comrade Mariah. Can you please take us through the announcements?
Yeah. So if you're interested in getting connected with the Uhuru movement by way of joining, supporting, or volunteering, here is an upcoming event you can tap into. We have our One Africa, One Nation Farmers Market. Uhuru St. Louis, mark your calendars, because Saturday, September 20th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., it's all happening at O'Fallon Park. One Africa, One Nation Farmers Market is back at 4343 West Florissant Avenue. And this isn't just a market, it's a movement. Come experience community, culture, and commerce in action. From fresh produce and handcrafted goods to Black-owned vendors, live performances, and powerful grassroots organizing. This is the place where African self-determination takes root. This event is brought to you by All African People's Empowerment Project and the Black Power Blueprint. So you already know it's about building power from the ground up. Don't miss your chance to be a part of the vibrant and growing movement. Bring your family, support local Black businesses, and be a part of the future where we're creating together. So y'all, for more events and everything else that we have going on, visit theburningspear.com/events. And of course, we'll be keeping you updated here on One Africa Worldview. So make sure you subscribe on any of our socials. So make sure you're locked in and you're following us here.
All right. Thank you so much, Comrade Mariah. That is it for today's show. As always, thank you for joining in. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get notifications for when we're live every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So please make sure you know that time change. We stream all the Burning Spear TV YouTube, Burning Spear Media Rumble, and now on Black Power 96.3 FM, based in St. Pete, Florida, and also streaming globally on the Black Power 96 FM app. So until next week, comrade, One Africa,
One Nation.
Uhuru.